a command, talk about that. And so did have one moment where I was like, can you talk? And I was like, no, I'm not going to try. I'm really going to try not to do that to you.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Okay, I connected through my phone. We're all set.
Yay.
Oh boy. Okay.
How are you?
I'm excellent. How are you both doing?
Yeah, we're good. I'm ready to go to bed, but other than that, I'm fine.
I bet.
Excellent.
All right.
It is very weird to have it at that time. 2 nights in a row, I've had things in California at 10 p.m. my time, but 11, no, 11 is just.
But I'm okay. I'm totally okay because I'm so excited. So I'm wide awake. I have my cat sprawled on the other side of the computer. I hope she doesn't walk on my.
Oh, that's great. I hope she does.
That is the
It would
best.
be perfect for this book. We need the cat. We need that prop.
Yes.
So great.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I'm just sending out the last link to some attendees, and then we should be good to go.
Francesca, is it coming out in Italian, in Italy at the same time?
No, because I'm translating it right now.
Okay. Interesting.
I'm being very slow. So I think in the fall, yeah.
Okay.
In the fall it will be out with the same title.
Yeah. Oh, I reread it in the past week, and I'm just like agog all over again. It is just so powerful. Really, really amazing.
You know that I'm so glad we finally met because you know that I told you I was so in love with Euphoria, and I thought this will make such a fabulous film. And I was wondering, I remember that somebody, was it an English director that had optioned it in the past?
Yes, Michael Apted.
Exactly. Did that ever come through? I mean, what are they doing?
So right now the BBC has it.
Oh, good.
But Michael Apted has dementia. And so he's kind of off the project.
Because now you can, maybe somebody younger and maybe a woman or something.
I know, that would be fabulous, but I get the sense that it's really languishing there.
That's languishing, you think?
Yeah.
Who is it with? Joe Oppenheimer?
I have no idea. That's how little I pay attention.
Right. Yeah. You're just sitting. Oh.
I know.
It would make such a great movie.
Well, I think it would it's a really hard movie to make.
Yeah, I agree.
I think they're just like.
Yeah, you would have to reconstruct the whole village and.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think Michael Apted really thought he had to go to at least Australia, if not, Fiji or somewhere.
Yeah. It's doable though. I mean, it would be one location. It wouldn't be so hard.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like I have to save my questions for the interview, but are you working on a movie right now too?
Yes, I am. I'm working on 2 projects. One is a TV series.
Oh.
And, yeah. It's an adaptation from a book, an Italian book called The Art of Joy, which is a book that was written in the 70s by this woman. And then it didn't really make a fortune here. Then in France, they loved it. And then it sort of went to sleep. And anyway, it's a strange book. And we're trying to make a series out of it. And then I'm working on a film project with a director who keeps changing his mind. So we've gone through 2 different plots already, and maybe now he wants to do something else. So, I mean, it's a bit stressing, yes. And I'm Zooming with him every day for 4 hours a day. And frankly,
oh my gosh,
it's not really a lot of fun.
Wow.
That's exhausting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway.
Alrighty. So we're at 5. So this is all on practice, so we can broadcast it now, which means people should be able to join. And I have a very short intro that I'm just going to read quickly, and then I'm going to just duck out and be the silent bouncer behind the scenes, and it should be you two. And Lily, I can send you the questions directly in the chat just so you have them right in front of you.
Okay.
From the audience.
from the audience, but we won't see the audience. Are we going to see them join or no?
I don't think we'll see them join. I think in the webinar it just shows you two, but I should have control over everything here, so we should be good to go.
Okay.
So I'm ready whenever you guys are.
Okay, we're super ready.
Great. All right.
Thank you, Gracie.
I know. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Here. Slowly filtering all in now. So we'll just wait for everyone to get settled and then we can get started. Okay. All right. I'm going to get started now. People will trickle in and then we'll get started on the event. But I just want to thank everyone for coming out virtually tonight. I'm Gracie. I'm the events coordinator for Print. And I just want to go over a few housekeeping details before we get started. So we have all the microphones turned off for the conversation because it just tends to help with internet connectivity. If you have any questions, please enter them in the chat box and we'll go through them as we go. And if you'd like a copy of Animal Spirit, I will include the link in the chat box for the print page so you can access it all from here as soon as we're done. So now for our speakers. Lily King is the award-winning author of 5 novels, most recently Writers and Lovers. Her 2014 novel Euphoria won the Circus Award, the New England Book Award, and was a finalist for the National Book Critics Award. Francesca Marciano is the author of the novels Rules of the Wild, Casa Rosa, and The End of Manners, and the story collections The Other Language and Animal Spirit. And she's coming to us now from Rome, I think. She lives in Rome, but she could be somewhere else. But just join me in virtually welcoming Lily King and Francesca Marciano.
Hello.
Hi. Francesca, I'm so glad you're here. This is so exciting.
And I'm excited to be here too. And that you for me.
Is this your first event? No. First Zoom event?
Yes, the book just came out yesterday and this is my very first event.
Yay! We're so honored here in Maine. But I'm sure there are people tuning in from all over. So I just want to show, it ended up being this is a galley, but this is the real cover, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. So Francesca's new book is Animal Spirit, and it is so fantastic. I cannot tell you how much I love this book. And my friend Lara, who lives in Portland, turned me on to Francesca, and she gave me this galley to read, and I just was mad for it. And then I had to read your other story collection, The Other Language, and then I had to read The Rules of the Wild, and now I'm reading Casa Rosa. So I am just like a mad fan, so forgive me. But I think we should start with the animals. And I mean, the most amazing thing about this book is that there's just not a dud in there. You know, usually in a short story collection, there's 1 or 2 weaker stories that are kind of like hidden, you know, somewhere in the middle, and you're kind of scared with short story collections, I think, to get to the middle because you feel like, they're gonna be the duds in there, and then there's no dud here, you know, which is so exciting. So there are snakes, there's a dog, there are elks, there are seagulls, and a hawk, and yet, you know, I kind of hate to say that because it's not a book about animal. I mean, if I heard that, a book about animals, like I like books about human beings, and this is so much about human beings and how the animals, you know, connect them in certain ways. And there's occasionally they put on a spell, and occasionally, you know, they're magical, but it's much more sort of real and earthy, you know, and earth-like than that, and extremely profound. And so I guess I'm wondering if you knew if you knew right away that animals are going to be a part, or did it sort of happen? Did it kind of unfold unbeknownst to you?
Thanks for asking me this, because no, I didn't. But I realized I wanted to write, the first story I wanted to write was about the one about the seagulls. You know, Rome's invaded by seagulls, and they become more and more. And I heard that someone who had been, had been attacked by a seagull on her terrace and had tried to get rid of the seagull in any possible way, finally ended up calling a falconer, and he came with a hawk. Yeah. And that stuck in my mind. That was about 10 years ago, and I thought, I'd love to write a story about, this, a wild animal in the sky of Rome. It just seemed like something magical, but but as you say, that was the first one. And then I think I started writing another story, and it happened to have a connection with another animal. But as you say, this is not a book about pets or
exactly.
It's not. If anything, the animals that live in the book are wild creatures, and somehow it's really about the connection, which is a word that comes back many times in the book. The connection with that sort of wild part that lives within us as humans. And so it's almost about, in some of these short stories, is more about the transfer of power between that animal part that we have lost and maybe the presence of an animal that sort of awakens that energy and that wild animal spirit. Because so it is about people and people's relationships. But I felt halfway through, because I started writing one short story after the other, and at some point I said, oh my God, there is I didn't think there was a connection at first between any of them, and I thought maybe it's not so necessary to write a collection that has a theme. But then, instinctively they kept coming, and then I realized that I had created a sort of a world that had this sort of red thread that was going through them, that had to do with that animal presence, that's what I mean. Yeah.
And the animals, in various ways, and everyone is so different. It's not like you repeat the same sort of thing. They come in such different ways around different corners, but they always offer transformation. It seems like there's some sort of transformation, either for good or for ill, or but they're kind of a catalyst in some way.
Yeah, they're a catalyst, and they inspire different feelings. One story, and a wild animal that exudes power and strength fuels the rage of one of the characters, and her need for revenge. Or in another one, the sort of maternal instinct that seems lost in a couple comes back, and it's a different incarnation, if you want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then in the first one, so interesting. I just love that first story so very much. And you have a man, Sandro, who opens his phone. Like the first sentence of the whole collection is, Sandro felt the phone purring inside his pocket. I mean, so brilliant, so brilliant. I mean, the phone is purring. And then, and basically it is his lover who's calling to say that her husband has just died very suddenly. And like immediately, that the balance of their relationship has just gone, completely out of whack. And then we go back and then we see how they met. And I just want to quote this because it's so beautiful. He had taken a yoga class with her, and he'd kind of had a thing for her, and then finally followed her. And then when they first had a conversation outside the class, she was basically telling him that, explaining to him when she says to open up, that it's both physical and emotional. And then she says she still had the narrator says, she still had her fingertips on his sternum, and Sandro felt his heart begin to race. Something inside his rib cage, a surge of air, a tiny creature, spread its wings and flew out of his lungs, following which a vigorous erection bloomed. And so that's the first animal, apart from the phone purring. That's the first animal, you know, that we see is this tiny creature that spreads its wings and flies out of him. But in that story, I would say the wild animal is really her, is the woman. I mean, several times she gets referred to because she becomes, you know, wild after you know the balance is shifted between them. And then the next one, the woman is also sort of wild, and so there is a relationship too, you know, and similarities between the animals and the women. Would you say that's true?
I think so. You know, in one of the stories, the snakes are very erotic. And I think, you know, that, yes, of course, all the protagonists are women. But I also think that there is, you know, I was interested in that, as you know, you were saying before, I'm interested in that idea of this wilderness, that is surrounding us and we no longer see it. For instance, in There Might Be Blood, which is a story about the seagulls and the hawk. At one point, the protagonist, after she's had this experience with the hawk and the falconer, her world, she's been looking around, but suddenly she lifts her eyes and she starts looking up and realizes so much is going on above her head. You know, the sky is teeming with birds that are doing all sorts of things. It's like we kind of forget, you know, the wildlife and what they communicate with us and how they communicate with us. I was also thinking that during this long period where we've all been at home, one of the joys, of the few joys that we had, was to see that wilderness creep up outside our windows. Even in big cities, you know, in Rome, you know, actually the birds took over. And I know, you know, we've all seen online, you know, and the joy that we had in recognizing that the wilderness was back. It sort of gave us hope. And I think that that's part of, you know, it's that reminder of, you know, who we are, where we came from, and that need to recognize that there is that power that we seem to have lost, but that we can reconnect with. And I think that that is something that women probably also feel very much, maybe in a different way that men do, because, you know, men maybe are more proactive about, you know, hunters, gatherers, but we have you know, we do have a very deep connection with that part of ourselves. And as you say in that story, yes, the protagonist, madly in love and mad with pain when she realizes that, you know, probably she will lose her lover, also seems to be able to forget these two little girls who are like kittens, you know, and to sort of forget about them for a moment because she's so taken by, you know, what she's going through with her lover and so forth. So
it's so true. And I also think it is an interesting time to have this book come out, because not only is you know, nature kind of coming back to us and into our urban lives, but we are also going out to nature, because we, you know, there's been so little else to do, really, and little else to see, that we've finally taken the time to, I mean, I felt my connection with nature just increase immediately the minute we went inside.
And we were desperate to get out and get that walk every day and to be back, you know, you know, I was in the city of Rome, but you know, Rome's one of the greenest cities in the world, it turns out. I didn't know that. I was surprised when I was told.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, it is, because we have so many parks. But I remember, you know, how I was hungry for being close to trees again, you know, and yes, so the lack of it, you know, having to be within our four walls made it so crucial that we could get out. And yeah, in many ways it was magic to, you know, to find that birds were nesting in, you know, in the like tires of the cars, you know, these monsters that we had abandoned on the side of the street became now places where little birds could nest and use them as homes. You know, it was really so fast how, you know, they were taking the city back and using it.
Mm-hmm. And tell me, have you had any sort of, you know, or many moments of transformation with an animal? Can you think of a time that seeing an animal was, you know, really made an impression on you? I mean, I know you lived in Kenya for many years.
I lived in Kenya for 10 years. So yeah, I've had several close encounters. Once on foot with a big elephant.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it was a kind of not a very peaceful one. So I remember, you know, I mean, just being so small and this gigantic creature. And he was a bit angry, and I was scared for a moment. But I mean, I remember, yeah, you know, animals, one sees them, and then when you see them in the wild for the first time, it's, you know, it is so much different. It's so different. I remember sleeping on, you know, we were like on safari, so to speak, but, you know, we were sleeping in our little tents and just falling asleep and hearing lions very, very far away. But, you know, the sound carries. It's a jolt. It's such a, you know, it's not fear, but it's that sense, you know, they're here, they're around me. And still I was like in my sleeping bag and feeling cozy and thinking, you know, this is magic, you know, this is what happens at night. And it's such a privilege to be hearing them and feel that it's going to be okay. You know, that I remember that as one of the most beautiful experiences.
Wow. Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Would you mind reading a little bit from
Yeah,
that?
I was thinking of reading just a couple of pages of a second story. It's called The Girl. And just so that to explain where we are, this girl, Ada, who is a sort of a little bit of a hippie. The story takes place in the 80s. And she's picked up, she's in the middle of the road and hitchhiking in the south of Italy, you know, in the 80s. So it's a very, you know, rural area, and she's hitchhiking and she gets picked up by this very strange man who turns out to be an Hungarian, Andor. And in the beginning of the story, you feel she gets into the car and she says she has to go and, you know, and stay with her parents for a couple of days. The man is sort of after her, and at first you think he may be something wrong with him, you know, but actually Andrew's a very nice man. He's older, but he keeps asking her. He realizes that the girl is sort of a hippie and she doesn't really have a plan, and finally he convinces her to follow him, to get in the car. After 3 days he comes to pick her up again, and he says, I have a job for you. And so he says, I'll tell you in the car. It's the long story. So now they're traveling north, and here he says, just before they reached Bari, Andor parked the car at a gas station. He turned to Ada, who had been quiet along the way, dozing off from time to time. Okay, before I tell you what this job is about, I need to show you what's inside the boxes. He had these very huge, big boxes in the back of the car. Ada yawned, stretching. I need to pee. She seemed to be always dictating what needed to be done next, which was unnerving. Even now, just as he was about to unveil his piece de résistance, she wasn't paying attention. He gestured toward the tiny market next to the gas pump. Okay, the restroom is inside. I'll wait for you here. She came back after a few minutes with her hair completely wet, dripping on her clothes. She must have put her head under the sink. He pointed at one of the wooden trunks. Open it, he said, but go slowly and be gentle. The girl fiddled with the lock. She peered inside. The snakes were slithering, one on top of the other, in a sort of triple knot that did and undid itself in slow motion. The mix of colors was startling. The bright green of the anaconda, like fresh grass, mixed with the pale orange of the ball python and the dusty pink of the young rosy boa. Tails, tongues, scales crossed over one another in a glossy tangle. She watched, enraptured. You can touch them, they're harmless. She looked at him, and it seemed to Andor that she was waiting for his encouragement. Go on, you can hold one. Just be careful not to grab it by the head. She placed her hand on the green anaconda. She seemed uncertain. Yes, like that. Now, hold his body up with both hands. She held the snake as if she were holding a rope at both ends. Then she lifted them slowly, so the snake was in front of her eyes. She grinned. It's cold. Andor noticed how her voice had changed. It had dropped its harsh timbre. Yes, and can you feel how strong it is? Yes, it's like holding she laughed, an iron bar. He saw how she was amused, but also intent, as she tested the firmness of those twitching muscles with her fingertips. He knew exactly what she felt, because anybody who had ever held a snake had the same sensation. Yes, it was like holding a giant dick with a hard-on, but it was also much more than that. She wasn't afraid. That was a beautiful thing. And what's inside that one? Ada asked, pointing her chin towards the larger trunk. A much bigger snake. Better not let her out in the car. I'll show her to you later, if you'll be willing to work with me.
I love that story. So great. And I love, she's a recovering drug addict, right? And then she discovers these snakes, and they kind of, they fulfill the role of the drugs. They give her a thrill. They give her kind of a sense of well-being, and yet, they're healthy.
Yeah. She ends up working with him at the circus, so it's, she sort of laughs to him when he says, because it's like a joke, girls run away to the circus. It's the biggest nightmare for parents. But anyway, yes. So, and so the snakes are also something physical for her. It's almost like, when they move around her, and it's almost like an embrace. And of course, she's coming from a family. She's been, from a family that is very unaffected, let's put it that way.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful, she goes on to the rest of, we find out what happens to her later. And this is like the interlude of her kind of transformation. She's going from one thing to another. And that's a great story. I wonder, every single one of your stories, after a page or two, I want them to go on for a novel length. I want them to go on for 200 pages. I get so plunged in and attached so quickly. And I'm wondering, do you always know what's a story and what's a novel before you start writing it, or do they change as you're writing it?
Well, as you know, being a writer, things always change a little bit when you write them. But pretty much I do know where I'm going, and maybe I don't know exactly the end, or maybe sometimes I do, but pretty much when you know what the process is. I spend quite a long time just thinking, pretending not to think about it. I find that is the most interesting part of the process, is when you seemingly you're not doing anything. You're just going to the supermarket, but you're walking, but your mind is working, like, when your computer keeps buzzing, it's still working, is processing. And that, and I build the idea, and then there's a moment where I know I'm ready to begin, when I have enough elements, where I understand where the story is going to. No, I'm too scared to start something if I don't really understand the arch, at least, of the story. I feel it's a dangerous road to take that can take me nowhere. Mm-hmm. So I kind of need to know where it's heading. And then, of course, as I write, and I'm sure you know better than me, it's always a surprise, sometimes then you think you're going one direction, then you have another idea, and things, magically sort of take another twist. But yeah.
And are you building it all in your head, or are you taking notes? Are you typing little notes into your phone, at the supermarket?
Yeah. Very, very small notes. Very tiny notes. I don't ever, and sometimes if I'm walking, I record it on my phone, because now I tend to forget everything. So yes, but I take very small notes. I have a lot of little, everything has to be small, even the notebook. It's like almost like I'm doing it. I don't want, it to be a big deal. So,
right.
Yeah. Yeah, but like words, and then, I think a friend of mine who's also a writer was giving a lecture one day about the process of writing, and he said something that really stuck with me, when he said, when you're in that moment, you become like a magnet, and everything that you hear, see, or even if you listen to someone else's conversation, just gets stuck, and to the magnet, and everything seems to relate to what you are writing at that moment.
Exactly.
And so, you're so open and so in search, and then it all, you're like, oh, I can't believe I just heard this. This is just what I needed to hear, that gives me an idea. So I like that idea of being a magnet when,
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. And again, I don't know why I want to know this, because I never write a short story and it becomes a novel, except once. But I wonder, do you think short stories, it's a different kind of magnet, isn't it? It's not like you're just getting a few ideas for a short story and a lot of ideas for a novel. It's just a whole different thing.
It's a different kind of building. It's a different building.
Yeah. And what is that? I'm trying to figure out, are there different objectives for a novel and a story, and can you define them?
I don't know if I can define them, but I think it's funny, because I wrote 3 novels, and then I went to short stories, and now I'm so in love with the form. And short stories are a harder sell, because not a lot of people love to read short stories. They feel, as you were saying, that maybe one's good and it's like, when we bought albums, and there was like 3 great songs, and the rest was like, eh.
Right.
Anyway, but it's a different form, and I think it's just, everything is about details in a short story, and you're not painting like a large canvas, so everything proportionally is to really focus on that one detail that will create the twist, the little gem that is inside that story that will flip it around. So it's micro, it's like a micro movement. And I love that. I find that so fascinating, that you can engage and read something small about, but Alice Munro did it so beautifully, and I think we all owe her so much.
Yes, no, that is.
And I have to be honest, when I was very young, I was reading short stories. I remember discovering Catherine Mansfield, and being completely enchanted by how she composed, and then of course I think it's a beautiful literary form.
there's just so little room for mistake, right? You know, in a novel you can make all kinds of mistakes and you can get forgiven for it, but with a short story, it's you know, it does
it's like you're drawing a miniature, an Indian miniature.
Yeah. And do you write one at a time, many at a time? How long do they take?
You know, I actually, this is my second collection, and both books I wrote in a sequence because I didn't have them. I didn't have, like, you know, I suppose many writers write them and put them in a drawer, and then one day you have like 17 great short stories that you've written, and so all you have to do is open the drawer and put them together. I have zero. I'm like, so I was writing them in one after the next.
Yeah.
And that's what I did with the other language and what I did with this. And so yes, it's a sort of it's very, you know, also you could recreate a new world. Each one is a new world, new characters, a new plot, a new landscape. So it's a lot of work that goes, whereas, you know, when you're writing a novel, once you've established your character, the world and the landscape, you're within those four walls, and then you just have to move your characters. And here it's like every time it's like, okay, now what, you know?
Yes. I mean, the thing I like about short stories is that it's not as big a commitment, you know, and the failure is okay. You can just walk away and you haven't lost too much time, and, you know, blood, sweat, and tears, you know.
That's true. Do you write short stories?
I do. I'm actually working on a collection right now, which is why I'm really drilling down on these questions about the short story. Yeah.
But don't you love the form?
I do love the form. I really love the form. I haven't, I usually just write a few in between novels, and then I just, you know, occasionally I publish them, but most of them they sit on my computer for years and years. And finally I'm getting them off of my computer.
Good.
But I'm so excited to write more of them. I really am, but it's kind of strange to think about that. I want to switch to the whole language issue, because you're in Rome, you're Italian, you write screenplays, and in Italy you're a very, very well-known screenwriter. In Italian, for Italian movies, and yet you write all of your literature, as far as I can tell, your published books are written first in English.
Yes.
Can you tell me how on earth did you acquire such incredibly good English?
Well, I learned English when I was quite small. Like I was in my I wasn't even a teenager. I think I was about 13 years old. And I spoke English. I had a really good friend, American, who actually came to live with us in Rome for various reasons. And, you know, she learned Italian, I learned English. But, you know, at that age, when you have a best friend, it's almost like, you know, you sort of have a crush on someone, you know, at that age, and you just want to communicate. So I don't even remember how it happened.
Wow.
But then when I was in my 20s, I already spoke English, you know, very well. But I then moved to New York, and I lived in New York for many years. Oh, wow. And then after that, I came back to Italy, and then I moved to Kenya, which was also English-speaking country. So I spent half of my life, in a way, speaking, you know, and I still have half of my friends are either in the States or in Kenya or in England. So my life is a bilingual life. But the reason why I wrote my first novel in English is that I was living in Kenya at the time, and Rules of the Wild was set in Kenya. And I actually felt that I should write it in Italian, you know, because I wanted to be loyal to my mother tongue. But what I did when I started writing it in Italian is I was translating my thoughts into English, and it really didn't feel fluid. So I just started writing it in English, and suddenly the whole thing seemed to, flow. What happened afterwards is that number one, I was so lucky that I was, published by Pantheon, and my editor at the time was Robin Desser, and she has been my editor for now 20 years. So there was no question that I was ever going to leave Pantheon or my editor. And when I came back to Italy, I kept writing in English because of that, of, loyalty to my publisher, but also and I'm coming to the point, I think it's my brain, I think, has like now decided that literature is English and scripts Italian. So if somebody asks me to write a script in English, in English, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do that.
Oh, interesting. And have you tried?
Yeah, I have tried, but I'm a little hesitant, as if I can't do it, which of course it's not true.
I know, because your dialogue is fantastic in the books.
Yeah, but also I think that, and this I've said before, I think that writing in a language that it isn't yours, and this probably may resound for people that are bilingual or have two languages, writing in the other language, the one of your adult life, is in a way more liberating, because it's not your mother language. It's not like your past, your parents, your history, your baggage, basically.
Yes,
so
exactly.
For a writer, it's a very interesting state of mind, because it frees you from, all the witnesses that we all have of our life, of who we were, blah blah blah. It's a new language. It's like it's a blank canvas.
Yes, yes.
You feel very free, and so I think that this is why I'm sticking to that. Although for me it's a little bit harder. It's not my first language. So it always is a little. I have to go a little step. I have to make a little step. But somehow, so I think that is part of the reason why, a lot of bilingual, for instance, June Palahiri, who's come to live in Italy, she's adopted Italian for the very same reasons. And she and I have discussed this many times, how even for her, embracing a new language has kind of freed her. That's what she also says quite often,
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense.
It does.
And now I know you're translating this book into Italian for an Italian publisher for the fall.
Yeah.
How is that? What are you encountering when you do that?
Oh, it's interesting. I'm encountering another voice, and I'm trying to retranslate it in the voice that I would have if I'd said it in Italian. It's interesting. I haven't done it before, but I've decided to do it with this book, to have, to have this book directly written by me in the Italian that, in the music that I have in my head when I speak Italian. Rather, a translator, also, again, it's a matter of being freer. I can make decisions in my translation that maybe a translator would not. Like, for instance, I can say, oh my God, this in Italian sounds terrible. I will change the phrase completely, Also, English is much more concise. It's much more direct. Italian is, is very Baroque. And sometimes you need to simplify it. So, yeah, I'm enjoying it, actually. I didn't think I would, but yeah, I'm very slow, so it'll take me a long time, but yeah.
I know that we're gonna start asking for some questions. I think we have a couple, but I'm gonna ask you one more question. Who do you read for inspiration and pleasure? What are you reading now? What do you recommend to us? All that kind of stuff.
Oh my God, that this is the type of question when they say, which restaurant should I go to?
I know, it's so true.
I can't think of any. No, I mentioned her before. Of course, I've read, and okay. Laurie Moore was one of my sort of idols that inspired me so much, you know, and
That's so
she's so
interesting, yeah.
funny, so brilliant. Then of course I had Alice Munro, and you know, and then I've been reading recently books like The Overstory, you know, about the trees. I'm so now into reading books that have to do with nature in that sense of connecting with, you know, that book of Richard Powers, The Overstory, was like really fabulous read for me. I want to read now this book about eels, which by a Swedish writer. So I realized that after writing this book, I'm interested in reading books that are sort of specific about, again, connections between us and the natural world. But yes, I have to say, I read a lot of writing by women in the last few years, and I tend to do it unconsciously. Mavis Gallant, another favorite of mine. Yeah, and you know, I mean, and I read a lot of, you know, Sally. I read also a lot of like contemporary fiction, of course, but and some Italian writers who, of course, are not translated. The only one that you know, thank God, become a cult here in the States too is Elena Ferrante, whom I also read and devoured.
Days of Abandonment. I thought about that here and there with this collection. I think Days of Abandonment is one of, you know, just a great, great novel. My favorite by her.
Is it really? It's so tough. It's such a hard one. Yeah.
I know.
Hard one to read. God, yes.
I really love that. I was gonna say something else. I can't quite remember. All right, I'm gonna do a quick rapid fire. This is my little rapid fire round where I ask you a question, you just give an answer really fast, and there are only like 6 questions, and then we'll go to the audience questions. Okay. Favorite place to read?
On the rocks on a beach.
Nice. Favorite place to write?
At home in my little studio, and surrounded by books, small room.
Oh, very nice. Favorite beverage while writing?
Beverage? Tea.
Oh, very good. Me too. Location of your biggest epiphany?
Again, the sea, swimming.
Nice. A place you long to visit?
That I've never been?
Yes, or revisit in this lockdown time or this pandemic time.
The Sahara Desert.
Oh, wow. Okay. And favorite story in this collection? Can you choose one? Or are they like children?
No, I will. Probably terrible things will happen to us. Can happen to us. The first one, probably. That's why I put it first. So I want to make sure somebody, I guess instinctively you have that number one, because you want to make sure that even if they hate the book, at least they get
true.
it.
Oh, that one, I just wanted 300 more pages of those people. I really, really did.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now I'm going to look. I'm not used to this, but I'm going to look at the chat and see what we've got. Is marriage unfriendly to the animal part of us that needs to love? That's an excellent question.
Is marriage unfriendly
to the animal part of us that needs to love?
What a great question. I think so. I think you're absolute. Whoever has asked me, I think you hit a point. I think I'm afraid you're right. Yes.
It's such a good question. It reminds me of, okay, I just have to read this quote that I didn't get to work into our conversation, but 2 people fall in love and right away you've got a corpse right there. One of the 2 has to ditch all weapons. I just love that. Like two people fall in love and right away you've got a corpse right there. It's one person telling that to another person in a story.
Yeah, it's true. One has to succumb immediately. It's the rules of the game. You can't two people be winning.
Right. Exactly. It's such a depressing interpretation, but there's so much truth to it. All right, and another one is, how does looking at the arc of the story within the larger narrative of a collection affect your sense of plot?
You mean the arc of the story of the whole collection?
Yeah, so if you're looking at looking at the arc of the story within the larger narrative,
mm-hmm.
how does like the larger narrative affect the small plot arcs as you go along?
Well, I think I've worked in a different way because I think I realized there was an arc only afterwards. So I wasn't really looking for an arc for the collection. I was just writing like this without thinking. And then I think that unconsciously, for a long time, I didn't think there was an arc at all. And then I saw it. So I think it was all very unconscious.
Interesting. I don't want you to give anything away,
Mm-hmm.
but is there any way you can define a little bit of the arc? I'm so curious to know how you would.
Well, I mean, you mean also in the way that I placed the stories one after the next? Well, there is one story which is probably, it's a lot about pain and guilt, but it's a story of redemption and about forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's a sad story, and it was painful to write. And but then I thought, this is definitely, you have to put it in the end, because I thought this book may have been slightly more melancholic, although, at times I try to be also ironic, but it is more melancholic than maybe my prior collection. Mm-hmm. And, it was just, but I, there's always, I feel at least that there's always a redemption in the end of each story. Nothing really ends badly. And even in this last story called the Callback, I really felt that was the closure of everything that had happened and so also in the beginning, the third line is he's dead. And there is a death also in the last one, and so, yes, but, I think there is a redemption at the end of each one and a sense of relief and hope. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have used the word melancholy at all. No. Just because I felt like there were so many things that were so exhilarating about, each story. Within, I mean, oh yay! What a beautiful.
My animal spirit.
I love it. Okay, so Lada is writing, our mutual friend. Which story was the hardest to write?
The last one, the Callback, because there was the material of the story so delicate, and it was so difficult to keep it. Without being, I mean, it was very difficult. I wrote it and rewrote it several times until I found the right balance. Mm-hmm. And you always, and it took me much longer than the others to get it right,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, this is from Elizabeth. Landscape always feels like a character in your work. With that in mind, are the locations autobiographical, or do you sometimes use a completely fictional setting? If that makes any sense.
No, it does make sense. No, they're all, I can't write anything unless I know, all the landscapes that I know very well. And so Taos, New Mexico, I've lived there for a while. And then, yes, Greece, of course, that I know quite well, and Italy. But I mean, I always need to know the place. I can't really make up a landscape that I haven't touched, seen, or smelled, or no. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I think we've come to the end of the questions. Thank you so much. This was so fun to talk to you. So I cannot tell you how much I recommend you all to go get this book, because it will be such a pleasure. And then when you're done with that, you should go get the other language, and you should get all the novels, and be like me and read everything, because she's truly brilliant.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone. This is so exciting that, you know, I'm sure that, I mean, it's almost midnight here, and I'm on the other side of the world, and it's just so magical that we can all connect.
It is magical, because we can't get to you.
I know. I hope to come soon. It would be, I hope I'll come soon. But anyway, thank you for this wonderful evening. And Gracie and Print Bookstore, thank you so much for hosting me.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.